Hi, this is Professor Brennan. I am here today to talk to my argumentation class, and we are going to talk about categories and types of evidence. So categories of evidence and types of evidence. When we're making an argument, we have to be really clear and understanding of what kind of evidence we get. Where does it come from? How recent is it? Is there a number of examples of the same example? Is it factual? Can it be proven in that way? So we're basically going to focus on that today. As you begin you will begin a research process. You've already begun it with the work that you've been doing in class. As you look at it, it's the way that we come to draw conclusions, right? We don't draw a conclusion based on one example. We draw conclusions based on several. And something that has, it's recent, you can back it up with proof, etc. Let's just get to it. All right, here we go. All right, categories and types of evidence. So what exactly do we mean by that? Well, when we think of it, we like to think of the general categories of evidence as things that are primary or secondary. Now, I want you to really think about how often you go to secondary accounts. All newspaper accounts, secondary pieces of evidence. Why? Because someone's interpreting that evidence or that information. That's a secondary piece. Primary is when you have a first-hand account. You have a witness view of it. You've witnessed it yourself. You know it's happened. Okay? But secondary means, and that's generally the way most information is, through someone who interprets what they see and tells someone else. Interprets the information. You have an intermediary has interpreted that information and then shared that. They saw it, they had the primary account, and then they shared it, and you're reading their account. It's not your account. You're reading their account. Okay? Important for you to acknowledge that and understand it and know that it's been filtered. Think of the game of telephone, right? When you play telephone, if you played it, all kids have played it in class. The teacher plays it to show you that you started with maybe a phrase or something, and by the time it gets around the class, which is through interpretation, through your ability to hear, through what language you're familiar with, how you interpret it, and what it finally gets to, it's usually hardly even reminiscent of what it started with. Now, is it that bad in journalism? Not necessarily that bad at all. But just so you know, things get reinterpreted. They start to change the form. So then we have categories of evidence when we call direct or circumstantial. So is that evidence directly linked to what the claim is? Right? Is it directly linked? Meaning, let's just look at crime shows. It's easy, right? We want a direct link between the murderer and the murderer, right? Why do they need a weapon? And then they need fingerprints, their handprints on the weapon. They need the weapon within, if it's in proximity of where the murder took place. And then there's a direct link between that person, the weapon, and the murder. It's direct. It's not circumstantial. Circumstantial would be, someone that you try to place someone in the time of the murder, or you can maybe put them there, but you have no weapon, you have no genetic material, have no that kind of evidence to prove. There's nothing directly proving that person linking to that murder. It's circumstantial. I mean, they happen to be present in that time. They happen to be behind the house at the time. But there's no weapon. And you can't prove that there's any reason why. There's no warrant, okay, which is your reasoning. There's no reason why that would happen. So you have to ask yourself when you're looking at your research, is it a direct example of evidence or is it circumstantial? Okay. Positive, negative. How do people use evidence? Is there a presence of evidence? Or are you using the lack of evidence as evidence? I'm just going to let that sit there for a minute. One argument people make about things is the fact that it wasn't talked about says something, right? The fact that no one mentioned this happening means they left it out on purpose. Okay, that's what it means to use evidence in either a positive way, there's a presence of it, right? Or there's the lack of it actually establishes something. Willing or reluctant. Is someone providing that evidence? Are they willing? Are they free to do so? They're not being paid to do so. You have easy access to that information. It's given freely without any pressure or their incentive to do so, other than just it's what they want to do. Or are they reluctant? Is the person reluctant to give that information? When people testify against what would seem to be their best interest, you have to ask yourself, if someone's going to testify that might show that they might be and somehow involved in a situation that's criminal or that's negligent, you have to ask yourself, well, why would someone do that? Do people do that? Again, we're critically evaluating. This is the way you get to begin to critically evaluate your evidence. Specific types of evidence. So when we're talking about specific types, we have to ask ourselves, like, what are the types? Well, one thing is, what about examples? Examples are evidence. And if we're going to say that here's an example of why this is happening, how many examples do you have? Let's take, for example, something that happened to me not that long ago. So this summer, I live near a canal bank, and or the canal bank is right in my backyard, basically. And the canal bank ends at a street right one over from my cul-de-sac that I live in. And people can actually, the way the street, it intersects with another street. So there's another street going this way. My house is over here. The canal bank is right here. Okay, if you can kind of see. And people coming from this street going this way can go right up onto the canal bank if they're being crazy. Well, someone was being crazy. Actually, someone drove down the street, cat on the canal bank, was trying to commit suicide. Well, they tried to avoid something. They came through our fence. And it was a good thing that we're going to have to get our fence replaced at the time anyway. But they came through a fence, and we have a pool in the backyard. And they almost went in the pool. So I'm coming up to where I'm coming with this in a second. So just hang with me. So that happened this summer. So we were in the process of getting a new fence. We got a new fence. Great new fence. Better fence than we had before. Then the wet season happened. We may still have more rain, but we had a lot of rain in January. And somebody in the neighborhood decided to steal someone's car. And they decided to drive that car when they were trying to, I don't know whether they were joyriding or they decided to drive that car up onto the canal bank. Well, the canal bank was wet. And wouldn't you know that the car slid down the canal bank into our fence? Bad luck, right? Bad luck. What happened with that doesn't matter. I'm going to make a point with this. So twice in the last 6 months, our fence has been decimated for different reasons. All criminal related, but for different reasons. Of people driving up their cars on canal banks when they shouldn't be. And so what I did is I called our council person, our representative, who I can't remember his name right now. It's going to come to me while I'm talking. But I called and said, look, this happened in the last 6 months. We can't keep replacing our fence. Keep doing this. So what can we do? I've given you 2 examples now. And he said, oh, you know what? Someone in another part of Fresno, because the canals, sometimes they have gates and sometimes they don't. This one doesn't have a gate. So you can easily drive up on it. And I was advocating, you need to have some way to stop the traffic to get up on the canal, like a gate. So the right people that are supposed to be on the canal can have the key to the gate and get in, but the people who aren't supposed to drive their cars in the canal can't. This has now happened to us twice, and this seems like it may be potentially a pattern, a problem. And this gentleman, who was a representative for the council person, said, you know what? Someone else is advocating for this very same thing, has called our office in another part of town. I think he said it. It wouldn't have been Cedar and Millbrook, like First and Cedar, First and Millbrook. And they were advocating for that. And so he goes, I need to go to the proper channels and do that. So there's now 3 examples of this problem, of the canals in certain areas where you can easily access your vehicle, to have that gated off so people can't access it and harm people's property. All these people that harmed our property didn't have insurance, didn't have anything, have no way to pay to fix that situation. That's a whole other thing. So I'm giving you this an example to show that in order for things to get changed, right, in order for someone to make a claim, you have to have examples. You have to have your evidence. Do you have a sufficient number of examples? This is what he needs in order for him to go to the proper authorities that can institute this kind of thing, which is in this case, the Department of Irrigation and Water, because they're in charge of the canals, for them to spend the money, get money out of their budget to build these fences. Does it make sense? Long story, but hopefully I've given you a really good example of how you need to do this when you build your case, that you have to have sufficient number of examples to show that it's necessary for that, okay? And again, are they representative? In our case, it was representative of things happening in people's property not being protected, and not fair for us, because we need to have a fence, 1, for our protection, and 2, to keep our animals in the yard. Okay, that was a lot, but I hope you understand. Let's go to the next one, and then we're gonna cut it off and go to the next lecture series. So the next lecture video is what I mean. So testimony also, like examples, you have to ask. I like to ask, not just as a source and expert, have enough people given testimony about the same issue? Okay, have enough people said this? And is the person who's giving, are they an expert? Do they have a first person account, right, in your testimony? That's also what you want to look at. Do they have what we call observational capacity? And I don't know whether I'm going to get to that. No, I don't have that on there. Put this in your notes. Do they have observational capacity, which means, do they have a first-hand account? Their testimony that they're given, did they see it for themselves, right? Are they talking about some experience they had? But if you're looking to give an example, is there a first-person account? And did it happen to them? Is it unbiased? Can they just give you the facts? Give you the facts of what happened without having an opinion? Those are the things you want to look at when you're looking for types of evidence that is going to build the credibility of an argument that you're making. We're going to stop there, and we'll be moving on to statistics. I'll see you in just in a bit.